search side of the business. I'm looking to see if you nod your head or not as I describe this, Tim. But Tim is also, he has been a past speaker. Tim is very much involved with some of the other networking groups elsewhere in the community that he can talk about. And if you are new in this process, I would encourage you to make it your job to go to some of these other groups, because each one is unique and has its own personality and different networks, and you'll see familiar faces as well. So I would encourage you that he can explain those to you. So Tim wants, his topic tonight is the 5 myths about job hunting. Every one of us has probably heard, well, you know what you ought to do, and let me tell you what it's like. And you know what, often the times the people that are telling you those things, it's really not always true. And I think Tim will share some light on that. And also would encourage you, after Tim's talk, and we talked about the breakout sessions, Tim will be one of our breakout speakers. So if there's questions you have, or you want to challenge this or know more, what did he mean when he said this or that, you'll be able to meet with him at his table and go deeper on some of these things. But Tim, I'll turn it over to you, and then after Tim, we've got a little break, and then we'll come back together, and I'm going to let Craig explain the different breakout tables we have, and then you'll be free to float to the different tables as you like.
Thanks again
for being
Mike.
Here tonight.
I really appreciate it. Yeah, I really like coming here. I really enjoy it. You know, part of it is because I really feel like if you can't make further in the kingdom part of your business, you might not want to be in business. So I try to reach out as much as I possibly can, and I try to help people as much as I possibly can. And maybe one of the things that I do is to remove the fog behind what, for many people, is the first time they've ever found themselves unemployed, or really for some people that just simply have spent a lot of time doing it and just appear to be spinning their wheels. And some of it is because I'm actually guilty of doing some stuff that, I'm actually guilty of doing some stuff that I try to encourage people not to do, which is to tell people that there are nothing but absolutes in the job hunting world. I would tell you there are no absolutes. But I would also tell you that there are some myths out there that are extremely prevalent and very difficult to deny. And in addition to denying them, people think that if you do deny them, you will suffer. And so I'm going to go through several of those tonight. And probably the most important thing for me to do is to give you this caveat, so that I will not be sued or anything of that nature. So here's the caveat. If what I tell you makes perfect, intuitive sense to you, I want you to use it. If it makes no sense to you intuitively, please do not use it. So that's my escape clause. Don't use it if it doesn't make sense, but use it if it does. So let me, and then I'll be available to answer questions. Anything you want about job hunting, I'll be happy to help you, or at least explain or give you my take on it. So what are the myths? Well, the first myth that exists is, actually, maybe I should ask a question instead. So, how many of you are actively out of work right now? Okay, all right. What have you heard is absolutely essential as to how much time you should spend looking for a job? Anybody? Five hours a week? More. How many think 5 hours a week? 10? 20? 20? Full time. You've heard that, Charlie? Full time? Yeah, well, you know what? No. Part of the myth about full time is you cannot do this full time. Oh, no, I take that back. You can do it full time. The question really is whether or not what you're going to do is very active and very effective. And for the most part, I would tell you that if you try to do a job search full time, you will find that it is not very effective, and that you will also get extremely frustrated over a period of time. Now, for those of you who have worked and understand that, one of the things that happens is you find out when you're unemployed that people go home at 5 o'clock, they don't get into the office till 8, and just because you are busy on Saturday and just because you are anxious on Thursday night does not mean that they are. So you really cannot spend the time that you want to spend doing your work, because the people out there that might hire you are not going to cooperate with you. You're going to put phone calls out that won't get returned. You might have to go and lay out 3 or 4 phone calls to get one of them returned in this situation. So patience for people that are unemployed is not a virtue. They become very impatient, and I understand that. Now that's one of the myths. So what do you do? I would tell you this much. The Lord does some really interesting things. And one of the things that the Lord does is to create spaces in your life that if you pay attention to the spaces in those lives, you can fill them up with some amazing things. But most people fill it up with junk. So, you know, as I tell people, there's a number of things that happen inside. When you're trying your level best to get a job, there's a number of pressures that come into play. The number one pressure that comes into play happens to be your spouse, who's not interested in you staying at home while she's or he is trying to do their work that they do at home. So we want to actually achieve some sort of relationship with our spouse that allows us to work together at this point in time. But the reality is that if you're a guy and she comes home at 2 o'clock in the afternoon and she finds you on the couch watching the Golf Channel, there's going to be a look. Like, what are you doing? And in place of this thing, because we don't manage our spouse's expectations, your spouse, whether it's a male or a female, will take a very interesting role. And that role, by the way, is called the role of the sales manager. It is the worst role that you can possibly take. It goes like this. How many resumes did you send out today? How many people are you going to talk to? How many phone calls did you make today? And that's what the spouse will do. Why does the spouse do that? The spouse does that because you have not laid out a plan. You have not told your spouse what you are going to do. I don't care if the spouse is male or female, it doesn't matter. If you don't lay out a plan, you will have a sales manager. And I don't know many people that like a sales manager. I know I didn't, and I know I didn't like it when I was a kid either. But I didn't like it as an adult either. So the reality is that what are you going to do? Well, if you have a plan and you execute that plan, then one of the things that you're going to have to do is to fill the void of time that exists, because it isn't going to be 40 hours a week. I think accurately what I saw around here, that it is about maybe a 20-hour-a-week job at most. And so what do? I like to tell people, you know what, one of the things that you absolutely need to do is to fill your time with things that you absolutely love doing. I tell people, go volunteer someplace where you really, really feel like there is a connection between whatever it is that you're doing and what you're volunteering to do. So whether that's helping somebody else, I would tell you this much as I can tell you, I would tell you that if you're feeling really bad and things aren't going very well, and you go serve somebody who is absolutely at the bottom of the heap, you cannot help but walk out and go, oh, I feel so good. I feel so blessed. Part of this issue is understanding, exactly how a job hunt works on you. The thing that I like to use, the metaphor that I like to use, is a vice. That's what it feels like. It's okay to begin with. You're pretty optimistic. And then that vice keeps turning and turning and turning. And then you feel like you're going to pop. And the reality is that the more, Mike said it earlier, sometimes you get so depressed, you won't get out of bed. So I run Lumen Christi Employment Network South. This is one meets at St. Martin de Tours once a month. And it's just purely a job hunting thing. And we started at 7:30 in the morning. Its tagline is getting you out of your pajamas. Because if you don't start it at 7:30, people just, it's easy to stay in bed. When you get depressed, it's easy to stay in bed. When you get a lot of no's, or what I think is probably more common, is you just don't get anything. It's not no's. You'd love to have a no because I could move on. But I don't get no's. I get purgatory, which is maybe. That's terrible. But maybe is a real issue. Okay? So what do? I volunteer. I take that time to read my Bible. I take that time to study. I take my time to do something that really energizes me. And you have to ask yourself, what kinds of things really energize me? Really get me juiced up and excited? Because what I can do is once I get juiced up and excited, is I can carry that into a job interview. I can carry that into a phone call that I do not want to make because I've already called the person 4 times and now I'm going to call them 5, but I'm going to do it. Something that's very, very important for you to do is to do things that you really feel like you get something out of it. Otherwise, you're going to fill yourself with all kinds of things that will add absolutely no value. None. You will also do something that I think happens quite a bit, and that is when you have very few opportunities and you don't know when to shut it down, you will take whatever opportunity you have and invest incredible amounts of time to try to do this. And I'm going to show you why that's not always a really good idea. So, let's see. Is it Donna? Yeah. Donna, you're going to go out to a company and you're going to interview with a senior level person at that company. And you have 3 days before it happens. How are you going to spend your time in the next 3 days? Because you're going to go out and interview with a hiring manager over at Johnson Controls, as an example. What are you going to do?
I would probably start reviewing interview questions and try to prepare myself. I'd probably figure out what the right outfit is. I'd study on that company so I could know a little bit about the history and maybe ask some questions that would show that I know about that company. Okay.
How much time do you think you'd be doing?
3 days beforehand, I'd probably be doing it full time, which probably isn't the right thing to do, but that's what I'd probably be doing.
Yeah, you would be working pretty hard. Yeah. I want to know everything about that company, right? Yeah. I want to know absolutely everything that I can find out. So I'm gonna read their 10K. I'm gonna read all of the stuff that I can get on the internet. I'm gonna go talk to my friends. I'm gonna find out everything. And then I want you to know what I've heard from CEOs that have interviewed people that have done that. What they tell me on a regular basis drives them nuts. You mean you tell me you've done 3 days worth of internet research and you're going to tell me what's wrong with my company? What I need to do? I will tell you this much. It may help you, but one of the things that people pay a lot of money for in executives and other types of people are people that can ask really good questions. But that's not what happens when you research the company from stem to stern. I like to think of it as Santa Claus. Okay? So, here's a little nugget that I can wrap up and put in my bag that I can take into the interview. And by the time I'm done with all of my research, I've got this bag full of data. And I'm dragging it into the interview. And that's what I'm going to be doing. And I'll tell you something. It takes the force of a wild horse to prevent me from pulling those things out. And I, frankly, don't trust many people who could do this and not pull the information out. I mean, the stuff that you might do in 3 days borders on stalking. Okay? So I got this bag full of data, and what do I want to do? Because one of the things that's kind of interesting, this is myth number 2, by the way, I need to research the living daylights out of the company. You don't. And the reason why is because when I go into that interview and I have all this data, boy, wouldn't it be a waste not to use that? So I'm going to, oh, I see sales are off 16%. And you sit there and you go, no, please don't do that. Okay, I work here. I know what it is. Thanks for coming in and reminding us. Okay? What I tell people to do is, if you do that, you're not going to do one thing that is absolutely important, and that is you're not going to ask any questions because you have all the data. Okay, now some people can do this, and they say to me with an honest face, and I believe them, that by getting all that data, they ask better questions. And I said, okay, I don't believe that. Because if I know the answer to the question that I'm going to ask, it comes out like this. Are you an idiot? That is a question, by the way, but it's not a good one to ask in an interview. Are you an idiot? I think questions have to come from a base and a core of basic curiosity. I am really curious. So what I like people to do is, I want you to read the website, because it is kind of embarrassing to go into an organization and go, do you know what we do? No, I have absolutely no idea. That's not a good thing either. But I want to be able to read the website enough so that when they say, do you know what we do? I go, yeah, absolutely, I know what you do. That's something that's very important. What do I spend my time doing? Is there 3 days worth of stuff to do? Oh yeah, there is. But it isn't researching the company. I want to research the person that I'm going to be interviewing with. I want to know everything that I possibly can know about that individual within the limits of the law. I want to stalk them. The person, not the company. I want to know. I want to know if they're married. I want to know where they live. I want to know if they have kids. I want to know if they go to church. I want to know all of that. I want to know if they're involved in professional associations. I want to know this, if I possibly can. But the more I get to know somebody in an interview that is going to be interviewing me, when I actually go in to actually talk to them, I already know you. That's not very intimidating to me if I already know you. I know where you live. Now, that doesn't mean that I say, you know something, I know where you live and I know where your children are, and also your pool level is a little low. You don't want to be doing that either. It's not gratuitous. It's not intended to create enough information so that you can scare them. But if I'll give you an example of a situation that I used. I did some research on a person that I was going to go call on, and I discovered that this individual was the president of Ducks Unlimited. So I suspected that they like to hunt, right? That would be my guess, okay? So I went into the interview, and that interview was not conducted in the person's office, but it was conducted in a conference room that had absolutely nothing on the walls. So when they said, how are you going to find this candidate for me? And I said, well, you know, finding candidates is a lot like duck hunting. You know, you got to be ready all the time, because the minute you set your gun down, there goes your quarry right across the top at 20 feet away, 20 yards away, whatever it is, and you miss your opportunity. You've got to be vigilant. And the guy looked at me and he said, do you hunt? I said, no. I'm going to be honest. But if you can find out something about that individual that connects you with that individual, you will move the relationship along much faster. And you'll get to this kind of lovely thing that occurs in interviews occasionally. And that is when you make a connection with the other individual on a level that is special. You really feel the connection. People come to tell me this, that, oh man, I just really feel like I connected with that individual. Why'd you connect with the individual? Well, I think it's because I knew that they had a special needs kid, and I have one too. And I just connected. Did you bring that up in the interview? No, I did not. So how much of this connection is what's in your own head? Because it might be in your own head. If I can get you to feel really good about the person that's going to sit. Now, the best story I have of all time is a woman named Kay. A woman named Kay came to Lumen Christi, and Kay, 71, she comes to Lumen Christi because she's decided, I think I'd like to go work. So I said to her, you got to get really excited about this. You got to get really excited about this, and you have to get them excited about you. And the only way that you can do that, and this is again along the lines of getting really comfortable with who you're going to interview, is to convince yourself that you're interviewing for something that's absolutely fabulous and that you're going to love it. So Kay took my advice. First of all, and this is her words, not mine, she said, I took a scarf and I covered up my turkey neck. She had one. And I went in and I got to the appointment about 15 minutes early. And I sat in the parking lot, and all I did was say to them, say to myself was, I am going to love my interviewer. I'm going to love working here. I am qualified for this position. I am absolutely ready to go work. And she kept saying that to herself. And when she went in, she walked in with a bounce in her step. And she was 71 years old. How many 71 years old really going out to find a job? Yes. Not only did she find a job, but they asked her, could she do something else? And she said, sure, I can do that. Her attitude was such that they were excited to have her around. So they hired her on the spot. And she has received she's now a department manager. And what I think is absolutely phenomenal is she had an attitude of gratitude. That when she went in, she just said, you know what, if you give me a job, it's fine. I'm not, I'm qualified. I'm excited to be here. My attitude is going to be really good. And so they asked her, can you sell shoes? Yes, I can sell shoes. Okay. 2 months later, she's the head of the shoe department, running the shoe department. Absolutely loves the job. She works at Walmart. There's dignity in whatever. As long as up here, you convince yourself of that. Okay? I can't even begin to tell you that managing a job hunt is a lot like managing the space in between these things. It's mental. In many respects, it's mental. You've got to get the attitude, and then you got to get excited, and then all of a sudden that stuff comes out. And you walk into an interview and people just fall all over you because you are really emanating an aura about you that says you need to work here. I can't even begin to tell you what happens when you walk into an interview and you go, you don't want to hire me today, do you? Guess what? No, you're right, we don't. Get out. And people get out. But I heard a lot of people shaking their heads when I talked about the vice. The vice starts turning. And you become more desperate. And you become more concerned. Because you know what? You believe I don't know if it's legitimate, but you believe that you're not worthy. Now, I don't know about you, but But sometimes the timing of Christ is amazing, okay? Sometimes the timing of this whole thing is all meant to send you a message about what I want. Not what you want. It's what God wants. And so that vice will turn. And maybe it's because you need a couple of edges shaved off of you. Could be. But by and large, that vice will continue to turn. But if you change your attitude and you start saying, you know what, Lord, I'm open for you. You know what, and I'm going to spend 20 hours a week doing this because I think it's a really good idea, but I am going to wait for you. You're going to tell me. It's going to happen. Okay? That's something that's very important. So you can't spend 24 hours a day, 7 days a week doing it. You can't research the living daylights out of a company and expect that you will not do something foolish in the interview. I want you to be curious, absolutely curious in the interview. And then when you don't get the job, what comes next is the third myth. And the third myth is, oh, there's age discrimination all over the place. Whether it's I'm too young, I'm too old, and whatnot. You don't want to be in a room with me and start talking about age discrimination. Because I don't believe age discrimination occurs in the trash. It does not occur in interviews. If you're getting interviews and you're over 50, 55, 60, 71, whatever, there is no age discrimination. What happens is, I refer to it, instead of referring to it as age discrimination, I like to refer to it as salary discrimination. That's more likely what the issue is. The more you are along in your career, the higher you get paid. The more difficult it is for us to hire you because we can't afford you. Now, in 2009, when the economy went to pot, in this case, you would find that there were people, in some cases, accepting jobs that were 50% of what they were making. And I understand the need to do that. But age discrimination does not exist. I suppose that it does. I suppose there are really mean people out there that allow this to happen. But I would argue that it doesn't. If you're getting interviews and then they're rejecting you, I would say that it has little to do with age. Because I can do the calculation, I can look at the resume and I can know, well, we're looking at someone who's 55 or 60. But here's a way around it. If you're getting interviews, something is happening in the interview that is forcing them to say, we don't want to hire you. A lot of times, you know, my clients, I got a lot of clients that do not discriminate against people of age. And part of the reason why is because, you know, if I'm hiring someone who's 55 years old, that's pretty cool. Why? I get someone who's pretty qualified, and I'm likely to have the position covered for 10 years. If I hire a 30-something, they're going to be here for 2, maybe 3, and I got to do this all over again. I got clients right now saying, hey, you know what, don't get me one of them 30-somethings. Get me somebody who's got a little bit of age on them because I want them to stick for 10 years. There's an advantage to doing that. But I think a lot of times what happens is, and again, this is what Kay did when she sat out in the parking lot and convinced herself that she was qualified, that she was interested, and walked in with a spring in her step, she became irresistible. And I like to tell people that the call of God is irresistible. You cannot resist it. Not only can I not resist it, but the person who's sitting in front of me can't resist it either. We are drawn to people of light. And so you need to be emanating that light. You need to get excited about the grateful nature of what God has to offer for you. So from my perspective, I don't really believe very much in the concept of age discrimination. I've seen people, I remember in Lumen Christi, one guy got up, he was 68 years old, and after the meeting, he told me he was 68 years old. I couldn't believe it. Your attitude and the approach that you take in the way that you communicate, when he started talking about his background and whatnot, he got up and he was so energetic. I think the rest of the people in the group felt like he was maybe 50 years old. So he only came to Lumen Christi for 2 weeks. The reason why he came to Lumen Christi for 2 weeks is because he was hired. People will hire people with great attitudes, with great energy. They will hire them. In addition to that, I think that you've got to get your mind around what it is that you're there for, and I think you also have to understand what it is that you want. When I talk to people about what they're trying to do, very often I find that people don't have a clear idea of what the plan is. They've never really thought it out. What do you want to be? Oh, I can be anything. No, you can't. What do you want to be? I can be anything. I can be this, I can be that, I can do sales, I can do anything you want. I think there's an attitude that exists that says I can do anything, and if it goes too far, it ends up being desperation. And companies will not hire people that are desperate. Sometimes I think the vice piece is associated around people finally discovering, I am here, I have always been here. And I love it. I was working with a deacon one time in a church, and the deacon came to me, and he had been let go from his job as a CEO of a company. And I said to him one night, as I was talking with him, I said, you know, you trust God in every place except this area. And the reality is, this is the area, when you lose your job, this is the area that God is saying, you know what, why don't you bring me in there too? You bring me in on Sunday, you bring me into your house, you bring me to some of your friends and your relationships, but when it comes to work, no. Nate over here, and Nate is a friend of mine. He came to my office today and he noted that I had ample signs that I brought God into my office. I bring God into my office and I wear it on my sleeve. I'm not embarrassed. I'm not afraid. I have offended people, I suppose, but I don't know. But you know, the reality is, sometimes this vice turning is associated around God saying, I'm here. I am here. I've always been here. And so the third myth of age discrimination, I would tell you, no matter what age you are, God's call is irresistible, either to you or to the people that are interviewing you. And the timing has to be right, because God's timing is perfect. And so when it doesn't occur, is this dead? Okay. So when it doesn't occur, it doesn't mean that you're a bad person. Doesn't mean that you're worthless. It doesn't mean that at all. What it means is God's timing is perfect. That's what it means. So, you know, another person came to me one day and was very upset, got fired. And he sat there and he sat there. And I mean, I have heard of people being fired in the past. This was one of the most egregious firings I've ever run into. It was uncalled for, it was unnecessary, and it was greedy. The reason why the guy got fired was because he was owed a very large bonus, and the president didn't want to pay it. So he fired him. So he sat there, and I didn't think he was in a bathrobe, but when I saw him, I thought he had come to Starbucks in his bathrobe. I mean, he had drug himself out, you know, oh man. And then he said to me, oh, God is sifting me, God is sifting me, God is sifting me. And I said, oh, really, you are so arrogant. What makes you think that God is sifting you? Maybe God is preparing you for something even bigger. And maybe God is using you to sift somebody else. And the reality is that is exactly what happened. He was there to sift the conscience of the person who let him go. When he was done, he is, by the way, he lives in Austin, Texas, and is a multimillionaire now. You talk about God preparing someone for something that was so unbelievable. That is exactly what happened to that gentleman. So sometimes you sit there and you go, oh my goodness, this is terrible, it happened to me, it happened to me, it happened to me, and I'm being sifted. The reality is, no, not necessarily. You're being prepared for something bigger. And if you believe that, you will go to an interview in a different way. If you believe that, you will approach your job search in a different way. And I believe that it's probably pretty important for that to happen. Whoops. I have my notes in here. I want to make sure that I'm following them, right? Myth 4. You need to find openings in order to find a job. The answer, that's not true. Great little study done by an outplacement firm, or a search firm back about 2 years ago, said that they went to Fortune 100 presidents of companies, and they asked them, if you had direct reports and you had an option or a better replacement, how many people would you replace today? So, what do you think the number was percentage-wise? How many would the CEO replace? Any guess? 60%? Nah, it's not, no, not that high. Lower, please. My goodness, it would be terrible. And a little higher. 35%. 35%, which means roughly about a third of the people in the company, if the president had an option, they would switch the person out. Okay? So you don't need an opening to find a job. And in fact, I will tell you that one of the key things that you need to do is not to find an opening, but to find a place where someone can establish your credibility. So the reality is this. In networking, everybody needs the same thing. You don't need a job. What you need is someone to establish your credibility in a place where you couldn't do it on your own or do it very easily within a reasonable amount of time. That's what you need. So what do people do when they go out to network? Who do you know can help me? Now, I've talked about this before, but I'll say it again. When my dad was alive, at Thanksgiving, I would go home every year and I would say, hey, Dad, yeah, what do you want for Christmas? Dad would think about it. And he would go, after about 30 seconds, he would go, I don't know. Let me think about it. I'll get back to you. He did know. He never thought about it. And he never got back to me. Ever. Okay? Why? Here's the reason why. What I did was go into my dad's space and I handed him the equivalent of a 1955 Sears and Roebuck catalog, which, by the way, was about that thick. And I told him, you have 30 seconds to decide. Well, he got caught up in the fishing gear, and then that was it. I lost him. And because the thought of him going through 800 pages of a Sears and Roebuck catalog was too overwhelming, he gave the 3 patented responses in networking. I don't know. Let me think about it. I'll get back to you. Now, anybody who does networking knows, yes, you do know, and as soon as I leave your presence, you will stop thinking about it, and you will never get back to me. Okay? That's what happens. So, yes, I understand you're frustrated because I make that phone call and the person doesn't call me back. Why? Because they haven't really thought about it. So, you know what? I'm not my dad. My dad was, my dad was 91 when he died. His thing was the Sears and Roebuck catalog or the Montgomery Ward catalog. What's mine? What's my catalog? It's the internet. And it's billions of pages. So when you ask people what to do, if you ask a request that is too broad in networking, you'll get those patented responses. I don't know, let me think about it, I'll get back to you. The narrower your request, the more likely it is that you're going to get a response. So here's the fun thing that if you wanted to engage in this, it might be fun, it might be interesting, and it might get you more results. What happens if you research an individual and you identify places that you know that person is connected to and then ask the person to connect you to that specific place? I'll give you an example. So I go to a president of an organization or somebody who I'm networking with, and I go to that individual and I say to them, you know something? Do you know Charlie? And they go, yes, as a matter of fact, I do. And I asked the second question, which is, hey, tell me something. What can you tell me about Charlie? Why am I looking for information about Charlie? Because I want some information about Charlie that I can't find on the internet. I want to know what his hobbies are. I want to know where he lives. I want to know if he's married. I want to know if he goes to church. I want to know all that stuff. And I can't necessarily find that out on the internet. So I'm going to ask questions. So I ask questions, and the person that's around starts telling me about Charlie. And then I determine that, you know what, the relationship that Charlie has with this person is pretty strong. So I'm going to ask for an introduction to Charlie. And guess what? When I ask for the introduction to Charlie, the person who's networking with me is able to focus, is able to single out Charlie and Charlie's background, is able to talk about Charlie's background, and then that person will likely introduce me to him. Okay? This becomes really important because when I go and interview or when I go and talk to that individual, and I tell people this all the time with networking, if you go out to network with somebody and you do not know what you're going to do with with that person 3 weeks from now, don't bother going. Because all you're doing at that point in time is stealing. You walk into a networking interview, who do you know can help me? Well, here's my silver, you can take that. Here's my gold, you can take that. And I go and I put it in a bag and I'm taking it out and I'm going, you know what? If you need this stuff later and you can find me and I let you know where I am, I'll give this stuff back to you maybe if I think of it. That's what you do. So in other words, I want to go out to the individual. I want to know who that person is. I want to have done some work about who's in their network, and I want them to introduce me into a node into their network that I know exists. And then what I do is I might find personally that there are at least 2 or 3 other places where I could go. But I don't necessarily bring them out at that meeting. I want something to do 3 weeks from now. So I call up Joe and I say, hey, you know, now I got a new person that I want to talk about. Do you know Donna? And he goes, yes. And if you do this 2 or 3 times in a networking situation where you constantly go back to the well and ask different information, by the 3rd or 4th time, that person will be calling you, saying, have you heard about Bob? You need to meet Bob. And so I think a lot of people want to do networking. They want to go out and they want to network and they want to do this stuff, but they don't know what to do 3 weeks from now. I've gotten everything I can out of you, so I guess you're worthless to me. So I'm not going to call you. The other technique that I love and I talk about a lot is getting permission to get in contact with the individual, to talk to them again. So I always say to somebody, you know what, can I call you? You know, and then I do something that hardly anyone ever does, and that is this. If I really needed to get a hold of you because I needed to talk to you, what's the best way to do it? You know, I'll tell you something, this might be fun for you guys, but I will tell you that it is true. I've gotten more cell phones from CEOs than you can shake a stick at. I have cell phones of CEOs all the time. Why? Because I asked them, what's the best way to get a hold of you? Oh, probably my cell phone. Cell phones for CEOs are like guarded secrets. Here's my number, you can get it. And so I always ask that question. If I need to get a hold of you, I will never abuse it. Only when I need to talk to you will I ask for it. But I don't think it has to be a CEO. I think it has to be anyone that you're networking with or anybody that you're interviewing with. What is the best way to get a hold of you? Because part of this issue is you go to and you're trying to get a hold of them and they don't respond because you're not communicating to them in a way that they appreciate. You know, I mean, I don't know how many of you. How many of you are interested in listening in on a 10.5-minute voicemail? I can't even stand 30 seconds. You better start communicating with me the way that I like to be communicated with. Maybe it's just a text message. Okay? But the reality is we have to look differently at the way that we're interacting with our people. And we have to understand that just because there is no opening doesn't mean that there isn't an opportunity. I have coached a number of people in this area, and I can tell you beyond a shadow of a doubt, you're doing really well when the CEO or somebody in a leadership position takes out a piece of paper and redraws the organizational chart right in front of you. That happened to you? Yes, it did. You know what? That's good. That is really good. That's a CEO or a leader trying to figure out how are you actually going to fit in my organization. Something that's very important. So I would tell you that networking is very, very important. If I had to give you a clue as to what the breakout is, and I'm going to be really mean on this, and I'm going to tell you pretty accurately. If you, and this is not designed to further any kind of discussion about age discrimination, it's this. If you are over the age of 50, get off the internet. It does not work. Networking works for people that are over the age of 50. That is pure. And that is true. However, if you're, I want you to understand what HR people do. I've never met an HR person in my life whose job was to make the pile bigger. They make the pile smaller. So, oh yes, you're qualified, here's the list. But you know what? I do these. If you've ever been here, you know it. Here's my pile of yes. Here's my pile of maybe. Here's my pile of no. I can tell you that maybe is still the same as no. And I'm only interested in this one. So if I have 50 resumes, I'm only interested in the 5 that I put here. And all the discrimination occurs here in this pile, and all hiring is discrimination because we can't hire everybody. We've got to discriminate. Now the question is whether or not they do it legally. But yes is the pile that goes forward to the hiring manager, maybe and no gets thrown into the trash or into the file. That's what HR people do. So in order for you to get a job and you're over 50, is you have to somehow rattle the cage in that organization and have somebody take that resume of yours and walk it down to somebody and say, you need to pay attention to this person. This person is worth it. I will tell you that if you're over the age of 50, almost every job you will get for the time that you are working will be with somebody who knows you and knows what you're capable of doing. So if you're not on LinkedIn and you're not putting all the people that you've worked with over the years into LinkedIn so that you can understand where those networks go, so that when you do have a job somewhere, you can point out 2 people in your networking, in your LinkedIn file that can go in and rattle the cage at that company, you're going to be out for a long time if you can't do that. And so I would tell you that that's something that's very, very important. Now, if you're under the age of 50, if you're in your 40s and in your 30s, it's usually not an issue. You can go on the internet all you want. You still need to go on the internet over 50 to find the jobs, but the process for you going to actually rattle the cage is different than a person who might be in their 30s or 40s. So that's the reality of what happens. I'm not saying that there's age discrimination or there's salary discrimination for sure, but what I'm saying is that you have to do different things to get noticed when you are over the age of 50. It's not good or bad, it's just what it is. So the myth is finding openings is the way to find a job. I don't necessarily believe it. I believe networking is the way to find a job. And if I had to break it down, it would be this way. If you're over 50, you need to spend 80% of your time networking, 10% of your time with headhunters, and 10% of your time, maybe paying attention to what's out on the internet. But not this. I can tell you that I've met many executives who spend 50 to 80% of their time sitting there thinking that their job is going to pop out of a computer. And it doesn't. And then the final myth is that headhunters are a great way to change your career. I'm a headhunter. I'm a really good one too, but I don't change people's careers. I think what you have to do is to understand what headhunters do. What does a headhunter do extraordinarily well? They take somebody who is in this industry and they put them in the same industry in a bigger company making more money. That's what headhunters do, and they do it exceedingly well. Now my story is around, and it works around the Christmas time, but I like to talk about Hermie. Do any of you know who Hermie is? The elf that wants to be a dentist. You never go to a headhunter and say, I'm an elf, but I want to be a dentist. The headhunter will look at you and go, what? I don't get this. It's that gruff old supervisor. We don't do that. We make toys. That's exactly what headhunters do. Headhunters take people from one job in the same industry and put them in another job. In the same industry. So if you're thinking about going to a headhunter, so when you go to a headhunter and the job is not a perfect fit, you're just going to have to accept that. It's not a perfect fit, okay, I'm playing for the next one. There are rare instances, but there are situations where there are headhunters that will take a risk. But most of the headhunters will not take a risk. They don't make any money on that. So they're not going to do it. So headhunters don't change people's careers. They do change people's companies, they change people's jobs, but they don't change people's careers. You don't look at a headhunter to say, you know what, I'm in sales, now I want to be in operations. Not going to happen. So the reality is, though that is, everyone's thinking, you know what, that'll help. The other thing that is happening, and that I try to work with people to try to get them to stop doing this, is they think that if they pick up the phone and call a headhunter, that's really good use of time. So in that first myth, it's a full-time job to find a job. That's what people do when they don't have a lot to do, is they start calling headhunters. And they play the game, this is the game they typically play, and that is the internet reliable? And it goes like this. Hey Tim, hi, this is Joe. I just want you to know that I sent you a resume. Did you get it? Yeah, the internet's pretty reliable. I got it. Did you get my address right? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I probably got it. Did you read it? No. Well, why didn't you read it? I sent it to you. Well, I get about 150 a day, and if I read every one that I get, I wouldn't have any time to do anything else, because I'm a slow reader. And in addition to that, so I take the 20 questions thing. Did you get it? What did you think of it? Should I should I change it? I think you got to understand for headhunters, what resumes do. We don't read them anymore. We stopped reading them about 7, 8 years ago. We put them in a big database and we keyword search them. And the only ones we read are the ones that pop out as a result of a keyword search. That's it. 5, thank you. And so I'm looking at the situation and I'm going, you know what? I really appreciate it, but don't call up headhunters unless you have a direct connection to the headhunter. And even then, as everyone tells me this, when I send my resume and it's a fit to an opportunity, it takes the headhunter about 12 seconds to call me. Because you represent money to a headhunter at that point in time. And so I tell people, does that mean you shouldn't do anything with a headhunter? No, you should send a resume to your headhunter. Absolutely. If people that represent your industry, send them to them. And just keep sending them. This is another crazy thing that people don't do. You know what? Resumes are a lot like milk. They last about maybe a month. Maybe. Organic milk lasts a month. Okay, so at any rate, they last about a month. And then people make this other mistake of sending the resume, and each time they send it, they go, you know what? I've been out since June of 2001. So, I just want to give you an updated resume. So, not only are you going to remind me that you sent it to me before, but you're going to also remind me about how long you're out. Oh, you've been out 2 years. Oh, that's great. I'm really excited to have your resume. That's really very exciting for my clients to hire someone who's been out for 2 years. Okay? I tell you, send it every 30 days, the same thing, as if you've never sent it to them before, as if you were just out last week. And by the time I know you're sophisticated, when I do a keyword search, and 6 resumes show up, because I know that you've been sending them to me regularly. I know you get it at that point in time. Why? Because I only keyword search back maybe 30 days. And if you don't send every 30 days, you're going to miss the opportunities that came in between. So today I don't have an opportunity, but 2 days later I do. And I already keyword searched, so I guess I miss you. In addition to that, one more piece of information is very important, either to put a paragraph of keywords in your opening email, not in the resume that is attached, but a list of keywords separated only by spaces down further in the email so it doesn't show up. And that way, when you get keyword searched in Outlook, which by the way is 80% of the search firms that are out there use Outlook as their search engine, and guess what? Outlook doesn't search attachments. So even if you put this beautiful resume in and you say, hey, it's my resume for your consideration, I do a keyword search, unless I'm looking for someone with a title of consideration, I'm not going to pick it up. So find the keywords that are used to represent your industry and put them embedded into your email. And then attach your resume. And if you don't want to do that, just embed your resume right into the email, down a little bit further so it doesn't show up, and then attach your resume to it as well. I've seen $250,000, $300,000 people out 6 months longer than they should be because they didn't follow that. So I've covered the myths. I've given you some opportunities. I've told you that Christ is here. He's in your life. And he, you know, I love the phrase. I love the reading. What son asking his father for fish would give him, or bread, would give him a stone? Your God wants the best for you. It's just his timing, not yours. Thank you. Do you have any questions? Are there any questions? Anything? I'll be at the table, and you can come up to me afterwards if you wish, and if not, I'll pine for cookies.
Great. Thanks a lot, Tim.